And it is the final countdown to the big Modi-Xi Jinping bilateral meet in Kazan, Russia. We're counting down. The meeting is expected to take place within the next 30 to 40 minutes. Modi and Xi Jinping will be meeting on the sidelines, as you know, of the BRICS summit that is currently underway. The plenary sessions are on. Modi and the Chinese president will be meeting for the first time in 5 years. Their last summit was 5 years ago, and it will also be, of course, the first meeting since the big military standoff in eastern Ladakh kicked off in May 2020. The two sides have already cleared the decks for this meeting by announcing one day after another a resolution that will begin the complicated and long journey towards possible normalization of military relations in eastern Ladakh, a place where the two countries almost came to a warlike situation after the Galwan clash in June 2020. The two countries, for the first time since 2022, when disengagement was announced from some of those friction points, have now made the surprise announcement that they have arrived at a consensus, a formula, a resolution that will allow both sides to return to a situation as it was before the escalation in May 2020. In other words, a peaceful resolution is on the horizon. Can the two countries, with a handshake by Modi and Xi today, something that was considered almost inconceivable, unthinkable, considering the texture of the military hostilities that have played out in eastern Ladakh since May 2020, will that handshake now fuel the path towards a peaceful resolution on the border in Ladakh? That's the big question that we're asking right now. I want to quickly bring in my colleague India Today's Gaurav Sawant, who's been live with us from Kazan, the only Indian journalist from the mainstream television media representing the press in Kazan. Gaurav, all eyes on that Modi-Xi bilateral. You were the first journalist to report that that meeting would be taking place at BRICS and that it would be taking place on the second day. What's the mood in Kazan? What's the buzz? What are you hearing? The main bilateral between Modi and Putin happened yesterday. That's done with. That's a relationship that has a great deal of predictability on it. The bigger question now is Modi and Xi. What are you hearing?
There is tremendous anticipation here in Kazan that the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping would lead to higher directions being given by the two heads of state and government to their respective diplomats and commanders on ground to take forward the disengagement process. Or will those higher directions come? Now, China wants closer cooperation with India on the trade and economy front. India wants to ensure that disengagement leads to de-escalation and ultimately de-induction. It's a tall ask, it's a big ask, but that is India's ultimate aim, because India has repeatedly told China that every aspect of this relationship can grow only and only if there is peace and tranquility and stability at the borders. Unstable borders cannot lead to a stable relationship between India and China. So it remains to be seen whether Prime Minister Narendra Modi is able to convince President Xi Jinping peace pays big dividends and there is no profit from conflict, at least with India. So that's the point India is trying to make across, that if China were to disengage, then de-escalate and ultimately de-induct, or at least let there be a roadmap for this process, then you can move forward in the trade direction, in the improvement of economic ties, in indication in that direction. But till that time, it will be status quo, and if for restoration of status quo ante, China will have to take visible, credible, verifiable steps to disengage and then de-induct from the borders.
Gaurav, stay with me. On India Today, we're reporting this story from all angles and from all possible locations where the impact of today's Modi-Xi meeting will be felt. In fact, India Today's defense correspondent Shivani Gupta is also live with me now from the beautiful Pangong sector of Ladakh. Now, the Pangong Lake that you see behind Shivani is one of the most stunning locations in the country, but it was also the playground for a great deal of hostility between the two sides that kicked off the entire standoff in May 2020. Shivani, The Pangong Lake, eastern Ladakh, is the entire war-like frontage where the two countries, the two Asian giants, nearly came to war over the last 4 years. But where you're standing now is precisely where the impact of today's handshake in Kazan is likely to be felt. It won't be overnight, it will be a long process, but it is the army and the military on the ground where you are, where those changes will actually have to be executed now. Shivani, what's the mood of the ground?
Shiv, it's immensely a strategic location where we are present right now, the only national channel to be present here right after the disengagement, and the agreement has been announced by the MEA. And it has already started snowing here, Shiv. And the temperatures have dropped down to minus 11 degrees as we are speaking. It's really challenging to be here. And we must tell our viewers that on the heights further towards the LAC, our soldiers have been there since 4.5 years, and they are all set for the 5th winter haul on the 17,000 feet of height, extreme winter conditions. And along the LAC, after the initiation of this agreement, the resumption of the patrolling is happening, and we also know that this will be leading to disengagement. I would certainly like to show our viewers where we are standing right now. This is the 160-kilometer long Pangong So, 1/3 in India, 2/3 in China, and the north and the south banks of Pangong So were the epicenter of tension after Galwan, from where we also saw, Shiv, the first phase of disengagement taking place in 2021 February, when we saw the tanks pulling back from India and China on both the banks. And then after which India took the key heights at Pangong So, we all know, after which China started building a bridge over Pangong So to get more mobility towards this sector. And when we talk of Pangong So, the northern bank has those spurs called fingers, Shiv. For the benefit of our viewers, we must tell them. And there lies the difference in the perception of LAC between India and China, where all the tensions had emerged initially. But after the agreement and the disengagement from this sector, the buffer zones were maintained, and from these buffer zones now we will be seeing that the patrolling will resume. And on Demchok and the Depsang plains, which have been the traditional friction points for decades now, there also we expect some tensions to ease out after MEA has reached this agreement with China for resuming the patrolling.